Sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest waves. In a world where every royal move is watched, analyzed, and debated, one simple act of humanity can touch millions of hearts across the globe. What happens when two people, living under the constant glare of public scrutiny, reveal their deepest vulnerabilities in just one unguarded moment? This is the story of how Prince William and Princess Kate showed the world that behind the crowns and titles, they are simply two people navigating life's most challenging moments together. Their quiet gesture didn't just move a nation. It reminded us all of what truly matters when everything else falls away. The cameras were rolling, the world was watching, but for just one moment, they forgot about everything except each other.
What followed would become one of the most talked about royal moments in modern history, proving that authentic human connection transcends all boundaries, titles, and expectations. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace, casting long shadows across the marble floors where Prince William stood in silence.
His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his tie for the third time, a nervous habit his wife had noticed becoming more frequent in recent weeks. Today wasn't just another royal engagement. It was the day that would test everything they had built together. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, watched her husband from across their private sitting room. She had learned to read the subtle signs of his anxiety over their years together. The way his jaw tightened when he thought no one was looking, how his fingers drummed against his leg during quiet moments, and most telling of all, the distant look that would cloud his usually warm eyes when the weight of his future responsibilities felt too heavy to bear. The past 6 months had been particularly challenging for the young royal couple. What the public saw was a series of successful engagements, charitable events, and picture-perfect family moments with their children. What they didn't see were the sleepless nights, the private conversations filled with doubt, and the constant pressure of knowing that every decision they made would be scrutinized by millions around the world. William had always been acutely aware of his destiny. From the moment he could understand words, he knew that one day he would be king. But knowing something intellectually and living with its daily reality were entirely different experiences. The recent passing of his grandfather, Prince Philip, had brought the fragility of life into sharp focus. Every family gathering now carried an undertone of preparation, of transition, of the inevitable changes that lay ahead. Catherine had watched her husband struggle with guilt over his inherited privilege while simultaneously feeling trapped by it. He spoke often of wanting to make a real difference, to use his platform for good, but the endless protocols and traditions sometimes felt like golden chains around their lives. She understood this better than most, having experienced her own journey from a relatively normal middle-class life into the fishbowl existence of the modern monarchy. Their love story had captivated the world, but living it was far more complex than any fairy tale. They had met as university students, two young people finding their way in the world like millions of others, but their relationship had evolved under unprecedented scrutiny, with every argument, every tender moment, every decision about their future dissected by media outlets and royal commentators across the globe. The pressure had intensified after their marriage and the birth of their children. George, Charlotte, and Louis brought immense joy to their lives, but also added layers of responsibility and worry. How do you raise children to be both normal and prepared for extraordinary circumstances? How do you protect them from the harsh realities of public life, while ensuring they understand their roles and responsibilities? William often found himself caught between two worlds, the man who wanted to be a hands-on father and husband, and the future king who carried the expectations of generations. Some nights Catherine would find him standing by the children's beds, watching them sleep with a mixture of love and concern etched across his face. She knew he was wondering what kind of world they would inherit, what challenges they would face, and whether he was preparing them adequately. The morning of the particular royal engagement that would change everything started like many others. Their staff briefed him on the schedule, security details were confirmed, and their outfits were carefully selected to send the right message. But there was something different in the air that day, a tension that neither of them could quite identify. As they prepared to leave Kensington Palace, Catherine noticed that William seemed more withdrawn than usual. He had been dealing with increased criticism in the press about the relevance of the monarchy in modern times, questions about the cost of royal life to taxpayers, and endless speculation about when he would take on more responsibilities from his father. The drive to their destination was quieter than usual. Normally, they would use travel time to discuss the day ahead, share private jokes, or simply enjoy rare moments away from the children. But today, William stared out the window at the London streets, lost in thought. Catherine reached over and gently took his hand, a simple gesture that spoke volumes about their partnership. Their marriage had weathered many storms, but recent months had tested them in new ways. The constant public attention, combined with William's growing sense of duty and Catherine's own struggles with finding her identity within the royal framework, had created moments of real tension between them. They had argued more frequently, sometimes about small things that were really about much larger issues neither felt they could fully articulate. But they had also discovered new depths to their relationship. Catherine had found her voice in ways she hadn't expected, becoming not just William's support system but his most trusted advisor and, when necessary, his most honest critic. The venue they were visiting that day was a children's hospital, one of Catherine's longtime patronages. She had developed deep relationships with the medical staff and many of the families over the years. These visits were among the most meaningful parts of her royal duties, but also among the most emotionally challenging. Seeing children face serious illnesses while maintaining their spirits and hope always left both William and Catherine deeply moved. As their car approached the hospital, Catherine could see the usual crowd of media, supporters, and curious onlookers gathering behind barriers. The sight used to fill her with anxiety, but over the years she had learned to find familiar faces in the crowd, the regular royal watchers who showed up to most events, the hospital staff taking breaks to catch a glimpse of their visitors, the parents and children who weren't patients but had come hoping for a moment of inspiration. What they couldn't have known was that among the people waiting that day was a family whose story would intertwine with theirs in an unexpected way. 8-year-old Emma Martinez was there with her grandmother, having traveled from their small town specifically to see the royal couple. Emma had been battling leukemia for 2 years and had followed William and Catherine's work with childhood cancer charities closely. Emma's grandmother, Maria, had saved for months to make the trip to London. Her granddaughter had been through multiple rounds of treatment, and the family was facing both emotional and financial hardships. But Emma had spoken so often about the prince and princess, about their kindness to other children facing similar challenges, that Maria felt compelled to give her granddaughter this one special experience. Neither Emma nor Maria expected anything more than perhaps catching a glimpse of the royal couple from a distance. They stood patiently behind the barriers, with dozens of other people. Emma, wearing her favorite dress and a colorful headscarf that covered her hair loss from chemotherapy treatments. Inside the hospital, William and Catherine moved through their scheduled meetings with remarkable professionalism, despite the personal tensions they were both feeling. They visited children in various wards, spoke with doctors and nurses about the hospital's needs and achievements, and participated in a roundtable discussion about pediatric care funding. But as the day progressed, both of them found themselves particularly affected by the stories they were hearing. Perhaps it was their own recent struggles that made them more attuned to pain and resilience, or maybe it was the way the children and families they met reminded them of their own 3 children safe at home. Whatever the reason, the emotional weight of the day was building for both of them. The days of citizens were available for family. During a brief break between scheduled activities, Catherine stepped away to compose herself. She found a quiet corner near a window overlooking the hospital's garden and took several deep breaths. The stories she had heard that day, of families bankrupted by medical expenses, of children showing incredible bravery in the face of uncertain futures, of parents making impossible decisions, had affected her more deeply than usual. William found her there, recognizing immediately that his wife was struggling with emotions that went far beyond their personal challenges. Without a word, he stood beside her, both of them looking out at the peaceful garden while processing the weight of what they had witnessed inside the hospital. This moment of quiet connection between them, away from cameras and public attention, would become crucial to understanding what happened next. In that brief interlude, they reconnected not just with each other, but with the deeper purpose that had brought them to public service in the first place. As they prepared to leave the hospital and greet the waiting crowd outside, neither William nor Catherine knew that their lives were about to intersect with Emma Martinez in a way that would touch hearts around the world. The stage was set for a moment of authentic human connection that would remind everyone watching why some gestures, however small, have the power to heal and inspire. The princess straightened her coat, the prince checked his watch, and together they walked toward the hospital's main entrance, where Emma and her grandmother waited with dozens of other hopeful faces. What happened next would become a defining moment not just for them, but for everyone who witnessed it. The autumn air carried a crispness that made everyone gathered outside the hospital pull their coats a little tighter. Emma Martinez stood pressed against the barrier, her small hands gripping the metal rail as she watched the hospital's main entrance with intense concentration. Her grandmother Maria kept one protective hand on Emma's shoulder, both of them scanning the doorway for any sign of movement. Around them, the crowd buzzed with anticipation. Royal protection officers had taken their positions. Photographers checked their equipment one final time, and hospital staff members who had stepped outside for this special moment shared quiet conversations about the royal couple's visit. The energy was familiar yet electric, the kind that always preceded these carefully orchestrated public appearances. But Emma wasn't thinking about protocols or appearances. At 8 years old, she had already lived through experiences that would challenge most adults. The 2 years since her leukemia diagnosis had been filled with hospital stays, painful treatments, and moments when her family wondered if they would lose her. Yet through it all, Emma had maintained a spirit that amazed everyone who met her. Her fascination with Prince William and Princess Catherine had begun during one of her longest hospital stays. A nurse had shown her photos from one of their visits to a children's cancer ward, and Emma had been struck by something she saw in their faces. Unlike the formal smiles she was used to seeing in royal photographs, these images showed genuine emotion, real connections with the children they were meeting.
They look sad too, Emma had told her grandmother after studying the photos carefully, but sad in a good way, like they really care.
That observation had stayed with Maria.
Her granddaughter had developed an uncanny ability to see past surface appearances, perhaps because her own experiences had stripped away many childhood illusions about the world being entirely safe and predictable. Emma could sense authenticity in ways that surprised the adults around her. As they waited outside the hospital, Emma told her grandmother about a dream she'd had the night before. In it, she had met Princess Catherine, and they had talked about being brave when you're scared.
Emma couldn't remember all the details, but she remembered feeling understood in the dream, feeling like someone else knew what it was like to smile when you didn't feel like smiling. Inside the hospital, William and Catherine were concluding their final official meeting of the day.
They had spent time with the hospital's leadership discussing funding for a new pediatric wing, toured the latest renovations to the cancer treatment facilities, and met with several families whose children were current patients. The visit had been emotionally intensive. One conversation in particular had affected them both deeply. They had spent nearly 20 minutes with the parents of a 6-year-old boy undergoing experimental treatment. The parents spoke about the impossible balance of maintaining hope while preparing for the worst, of trying to create normal childhood experiences within the walls of a hospital. Catherine found herself thinking about her own children's recent complaints about homework and bedtime routines, feeling simultaneously grateful for such ordinary concerns and guilty for any moment she had taken their health and happiness for granted.
William, meanwhile, was processing his own complicated relationship with privilege and purpose, wondering how to honor the platform he had been given without seeming patronizing to families facing real hardships. Their security detail had already conducted final sweeps of the route they would take to greet the waiting public.
The plan was straightforward. Exit through the main entrance, walk along the barriers for approximately 10 minutes, accept some flowers and well wishes, then depart for their next engagement. It was a routine they had performed hundreds of times before. But as they approached the hospital's main doors, both William and Catherine felt something different about this particular moment.
Perhaps it was the emotional weight of the day's conversations, or maybe it was their own recent personal struggles that had made them more attuned to authentic human connection. Whatever the reason, they both seemed more present, more open than usual as they prepared to meet the people who had waited to see them.
The doors opened and they stepped into the afternoon light, immediately greeted by the sound of applause and cameras clicking. William waved to the crowd while Catherine smiled and began walking toward the barriers.
Their security team flanked them at the appropriate distance, close enough to respond to any issues, but far enough away to allow for natural interactions. Catherine reached the barriers first, beginning her usual routine of shaking hands, accepting flowers, and exchanging brief pleasantries with the people who had come to see them. She had learned over the years to make each interaction feel personal, despite the time constraints, to make eye contact and offer genuine smiles rather than mere politeness. About halfway down the barrier line, her attention was caught by a flash of bright color.
Emma Martinez was wearing a vibrant purple dress with a matching headscarf, colors that stood out beautifully against the autumn afternoon. But it wasn't the clothing that stopped Catherine. It was the expression on the little girl's face. Emma wasn't straining to get closer or calling out for attention like many of the people around her. Instead, she stood quietly with her hands still on the barrier, watching Catherine with an intensity that was both mature and completely childlike. Her eyes held a mixture of hope, curiosity, and something deeper that Catherine recognized but couldn't immediately name. Their eyes met across the small distance between the barrier and the walkway, and Catherine felt an immediate connection that surprised her with its strength. She had met thousands of children during royal engagements, and while she always tried to be present and genuine, this moment felt different. Something in Emma's steady gaze seemed to see past the royal title and public persona to the person underneath. Catherine paused in her progression along the barrier. causing a subtle shift in the planned choreography of the visit. Her security team noted the change but didn't intervene, recognizing that the princess had identified someone she wanted to spend more time with.
"Hello there," Catherine said, crouching down slightly to be at Emma's eye level. "What's your name?" "Emma," the little girl replied, her voice clear but soft.
"Emma Martinez. This is my grandmother, Maria." Catherine shook hands with both of them, but her attention remained focused on Emma.
There was something about the child's composure that struck her. A quality of resilience mixed with vulnerability that reminded Catherine of her own recent emotional struggles, though on a completely different scale. "That's a beautiful dress, Emma," Catherine said.
"Purple is one of my favorite colors." Emma smiled at this, the first time her serious expression had changed since Catherine had noticed her. "It's my favorite too. My mom bought it for me before." She paused, seeming to weigh whether to continue. "Before I got sick." The simple honesty of this statement hit Catherine with unexpected force. Here was a child who had learned to divide her life into before and after illness, yet she spoke about it without self-pity or drama. Catherine found herself thinking about her own recent tendency to divide experiences into before and after various pressures and challenges of royal life. "You look very beautiful in it," Catherine said, and meant it completely. There was something radiant about Emma that went beyond appearance, a quality of spirit that seemed to shine through despite whatever she had endured.
Meanwhile, William had been working his way down the other side of the barrier area, but he noticed his wife's extended conversation and began making his way toward her. As he approached, he could see that Catherine was engaged in one of those meaningful interactions that sometimes emerged unexpectedly during public events.
Emma looked up as the prince approached, and her eyes widened slightly. She had seen him in photographs and videos, but meeting him in person revealed qualities that cameras couldn't capture. Like his wife, William had a presence that was both regal and remarkably human. "This is Emma," Catherine said to her husband, making the introduction with unusual formality that somehow felt appropriate.
"And her grandmother, Maria." William crouched down as well, bringing himself to Emma's level. "It's very nice to meet you, Emma."
"Have you come far today?" "From Northampton," Maria answered when Emma seemed momentarily overwhelmed by having both royal visitors focused on her. "We took the train this morning." Emma has been looking forward to this for weeks. "Well, we're very honored that you made the journey," William said, and his tone carried genuine appreciation rather than mere politeness. As they talked, other people along the barrier began to notice that the royal couple had stopped for an extended conversation. Some pressed closer, hoping to catch their attention as well, while others simply watched the interaction with interest. The photographers, initially frustrated by the delay in the planned walkabout, began to recognize that something special was happening. Emma, meanwhile, was processing the surreal experience of having these two people she had admired from afar giving her their complete attention. But rather than being starstruck, she found herself feeling oddly comfortable. Perhaps it was because she had spent so much time around adults in hospitals. Or maybe it was because William and Catherine's manner with her felt genuinely interested rather than dutiful.
"Are you feeling better now?" Catherine asked gently, recognizing the signs of someone recovering from serious illness.
Emma nodded slowly. "The doctors say I'm doing really well, but some days are harder than others." She paused, then added with the startling directness that illness sometimes teaches children. "Some days I get scared that it might come back." This admission created a moment of profound silence among the four of them.
Catherine felt her throat tighten with emotion, while William found himself thinking about his own fears about the future, though they were fears of a completely different nature.
It was Emma who broke the silence. "But my grandmother says that being scared just means you know something is important, and getting better is really important." Maria squeezed her granddaughter's shoulder, pride evident in her expression. This child had taught her entire family lessons about courage and perspective that no adult had ever managed to convey. Catherine looked at Emma with new understanding. Here was someone who had faced the real possibility of loss at an age when most children were worried about spelling tests and playground friendships. Yet rather than becoming bitter or fearful, Emma had developed a wisdom that many adults never achieved. "Your grandmother is very wise," Catherine said. "And so are you." What happened next would be captured by dozens of cameras and shared around the world within hours. But for the people directly involved, it felt like the most natural thing possible. Emma, perhaps emboldened by the genuine warmth she sensed from both William and Catherine, made a decision that surprised even her grandmother. She reached into the small purse she carried and pulled out a photograph that had been carefully folded and refolded many times. "I brought this," she said, unfolding the picture with careful hands. "It's from when I was in the hospital last Christmas. The nurses gave me this picture of you visiting other children, and it made me feel less alone." The photograph showed William and Catherine during a Christmas visit to a different children's hospital, surrounded by young patients. It had been taken during a moment when they were both laughing at something one of the children had said, their faces showing genuine joy and connection. Catherine took the worn photograph, noting how carefully Emma had preserved it despite obvious frequent handling. The image was a reminder of why they did this work, of the real impact that showing up and caring could have on individual lives.
"Would you like us to sign it for you?" William asked. Emma nodded eagerly, and Catherine produced a pen from her small purse. But instead of simply signing their names, she wrote a brief message. "To Emma, who shows us what real courage looks like. With love and admiration."
As she handed the photograph back, Catherine felt an impulse that would later be described by observers as completely spontaneous yet somehow inevitable. She reached out and gently took Emma's hands in her own, a gesture that violated no protocols but went beyond the usual boundaries of royal public interactions.
"Thank you," Catherine said quietly, "for reminding me why this matters." Emma looked puzzled for a moment, not understanding how she could have given anything to someone who seemed to have everything. But something in Catherine's expression told her that the thanks were genuine, that somehow their brief conversation had been meaningful for the princess as well.
The moment stretched longer than it should have according to the planned schedule, but none of the adults present seemed inclined to hurry it along. There was something happening here that transcended the usual choreography of royal visits, something that everyone present recognized as important, even if they couldn't fully explain it.
Finally, Maria gently reminded Emma that other people were waiting to meet the royal couple as well. Emma nodded understandingly, but as William and Catherine prepared to continue their walkabout, she made one more gesture that would complete the moment that moved the world.
Standing on her tiptoes, Emma whispered something to Catherine that only she could hear. The princess's expression changed immediately, her eyes filling with tears that she didn't try to hide.
She whispered something back, then embraced Emma with the kind of hug that communicates everything that words cannot express. The photographers captured the image that would appear on front pages around the world. A future queen, usually composed and carefully controlled in public, sharing an unguarded moment of genuine emotion with a brave little girl who had reminded her of what truly mattered.
The photograph appeared on social media within minutes of being taken. A professional photographer covering the royal visit had captured the exact moment when Princess Catherine embraced Emma Martinez, both of their faces showing raw emotion that transcended the usual formality of public royal interactions. The image was powerful in its simplicity. Two human beings connecting across vast differences in circumstance, united by something deeper than protocol or position. What the photograph couldn't capture was what Emma had whispered to Catherine in those final moments of their encounter. The little girl had looked up at the princess, noticed the tears in her eyes, and said softly, "It's okay to cry sometimes. My mom told me that tears just mean your heart is working really hard." Catherine had been so moved by this simple wisdom that she had whispered back, "Thank you for teaching me something important today, Emma."
"I'll remember what you said." The embrace that followed was Catherine's response to a child who had, in just a few minutes of conversation, reminded her of truths she had lost sight of amid the pressures of royal life. Here was someone who had faced genuine hardship with grace, who had learned to find strength in vulnerability, and who somehow understood that even people who seemed to have everything sometimes needed comfort.
As William and Catherine completed their walkabout and returned to their car, both were quieter than usual. The encounter with Emma had affected them in ways they were still processing.
During the drive back to Kensington Palace, Catherine stared out the window much as William had done that morning. But her expression was different, less burdened, more contemplative. "That little girl," she said finally, breaking the silence that had stretched between them since leaving the hospital. William nodded, understanding immediately which little girl she meant. There was something special about her, wasn't there? Catherine told him what Emma had whispered, and William felt his own eyes dampen at the wisdom contained in such simple words. They had spent months struggling with the weight of their responsibilities, forgetting that strength didn't always mean maintaining perfect composure, that leadership sometimes meant allowing others to see their humanity. Meanwhile, the photograph was beginning its journey around the digital world. What started as a simple news image quickly became something more significant as people began sharing it with personal comments about what the moment represented to them. Maria Martinez had returned home to Northampton with Emma that evening, both of them still processing their unexpected encounter with the royal couple. Emma carefully placed the signed photograph in a special frame on her bedside table, but she seemed more excited about the conversation itself than about meeting celebrities.
"Grandma," she said as Maria tucked her into bed that night, "I think Princess Catherine needed a hug as much as I did." Maria looked at her granddaughter with wonder, amazed once again by the child's intuitive understanding of others. "Why do you think that, sweetheart?" "She looked sad in the same way I get sad sometimes," Emma explained.
Not the kind of sad where something bad happened, but the kind where you're trying to be brave about everything and it gets really heavy. The next morning, Emma woke to discover that their encounter had become international news. Neighbors called to tell Maria they had seen Emma on television. Local newspapers wanted interviews, and messages of support began arriving from around the world.
But it was the response from other families dealing with childhood illness that truly amazed them. Parents wrote to share how the image had given them hope, how seeing Emma's strength and the genuine compassion of the royal couple had reminded them they weren't alone in their struggles.
One message came from a mother in Australia whose son was undergoing cancer treatment. She wrote, "Thank you for showing my boy that brave kids are noticed and celebrated. Seeing Princess Catherine cry with your Emma made us all feel seen and understood." Another arrived from a father in Canada. "My daughter has been following Emma's story since the photo went viral.
She says if Emma can be that brave and kind, she can be too. You've given our family a new hero."
The photograph had captured something that resonated far beyond the specific circumstances of Emma's illness or the royal couple's public duties. It had become a symbol of authentic human connection in a world that often seemed dominated by superficial interactions and carefully managed public images. At Kensington Palace, William and Catherine were experiencing their own wave of responses to the photograph. Their social media accounts saw unprecedented engagement, but more importantly, they began receiving letters from families around the world sharing their own stories of struggle and resilience.
One letter particularly moved them. It came from a group of pediatric nurses in Scotland who wrote, "We see children like Emma every day, and we see parents struggling to stay strong for their kids while falling apart inside.
What you showed in that moment, that it's okay to let emotions show, that genuine care matters more than perfect composure. That's exactly what healing looks like." Catherine found herself returning to Emma's words about tears meaning your heart is working hard.
The simple phrase had shifted something fundamental in how she viewed her role and responsibilities. She had been so focused on appearing strong and unflappable that she had forgotten the power of authentic emotion and genuine vulnerability.
The impact extended beyond personal reflection. Within weeks of their hospital visit, William and Catherine announced new initiatives focusing on mental health support for families dealing with childhood illness.
They had been working on various mental health projects for years, but their encounter with Emma had sharpened their understanding of what was most needed. The Emma Martinez Foundation was established 6 months later, funded jointly by several children's charities and the Royal Foundation.
Its mission was simple: to provide emotional and practical support to families navigating childhood illness, recognizing that healing involved more than medical treatment. Emma herself became an unofficial ambassador for the foundation, though her role was carefully managed to protect her privacy and health.
She participated in a few carefully selected events, always accompanied by Maria and with strict limits on her exposure to media attention. During one of these events, a reporter asked Emma what she thought about becoming famous.
Her answer, delivered with the straightforward honesty that had first struck Catherine, became widely quoted. "I don't think I'm famous. I think I just reminded some important people that everyone needs kindness sometimes, even them." The encounter had indeed reminded William and Catherine of fundamental truths about their role and purpose. The months following their meeting with Emma marked a shift in how they approached public engagements.
They spent more time in unscripted conversations, showed more genuine emotion when appropriate, and spoke more openly about the challenges of their positions. This authenticity resonated with the public in ways that years of perfectly managed appearances never had. Approval ratings for the royal couple reached new highs, but more importantly, they began receiving feedback that their work was having deeper impact. People felt more connected to them, more inspired by their example, and more willing to engage with the causes they supported. The annual Christmas message that year included a specific reference to their hospital visit, though Emma wasn't named directly. Catherine spoke about how they had been reminded that strength comes in many forms, and that sometimes the people we're meant to help end up teaching us the most important lessons.
2 years after their first meeting, Emma's cancer remained in remission. She had grown taller, her hair had grown back thick and curly, and she had returned to a relatively normal childhood routine. But she still kept the signed photograph by her bed, and she still remembered the lessons from that afternoon outside the hospital. During a follow-up visit to the same hospital, William and Catherine specifically asked to meet with Emma and Maria again. The reunion was private this time, away from cameras and public attention. They spent nearly an hour talking about Emma's progress, her hopes for the future, and her continued insights about courage and kindness. "You changed something important that day," Catherine told Emma during this second meeting.
"You reminded us that being real with people matters more than being perfect." Emma, now 10 years old and even more articulate, responded with characteristic wisdom. "I think you were already real. You just needed someone to tell you it was okay to let other people see it."
The ripple effects of that one moment outside the children's hospital continued to expand in ways both large and small. Medical staff reported that families seemed more willing to express their emotions and ask for help after seeing that even royalty could show vulnerability. Other public figures began adopting more authentic approaches to their own charitable work. Most importantly, countless individuals dealing with their own challenges found inspiration in the simple truth that connection and compassion could emerge from the most unexpected encounters. The photograph that had started it all was eventually displayed in the National Portrait Gallery as part of an exhibition on modern British life. But for the people directly involved, its true significance wasn't as a historical document but as a reminder of a moment when authentic human connection had transcended every barrier and boundary. Emma Martinez had indeed taught a future queen about the courage to be vulnerable, while Princess Catherine had shown a brave little girl that her strength was noticed and valued by people she had never expected to meet. Together they had created a moment that reminded the world that the most powerful gestures are often the quietest ones, and that genuine human connection remains the force most capable of healing and inspiring us all. Years later, when Emma was asked what she remembered most clearly about that day, she didn't mention the crowds, the cameras, or even meeting royalty. Instead, she said, "I remember feeling like someone really important understood that being scared and being brave can happen at exactly the same time.
And I remember thinking that maybe that's what being grown up really means. The quiet gesture that had moved the world hadn't been planned or staged.
It had simply emerged from two people recognizing something essential in each other, the universal need for understanding, compassion, and authentic connection. In a world often divided by differences of every kind, their brief encounter had reminded millions of people that our shared humanity remains our greatest source of hope and healing." One quiet gesture, global tears. William and Kate's moment that moved the world. Emotional stories.